Hi, everybody. I'm Bea Marshall, founder of Yes Parenting, and I am so glad that you are joining me today for this video. I am excited to welcome Hollie Pita Carr to join me. She's coming into my membership group, Yes Parenting for Happy Families, as a guest expert, and I can't wait to host her. Hollie is a mum, a best-selling author and content creator. She's a life purpose coach, an award-winning business innovator, a charity co-founder, a fellow adventurer on the journey of life, and she's looking to connect, share, and empower positive transformation. So I'm super excited. So Hollie, welcome.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me to join your amazing community of mamas.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you. How are you today?
I'm really well, thank you.
Brilliant. So you're a mum as well. So as mums, and women, we just kind of talk about our lives. So would you just share with us about who you are as a mum, how old your child is or children, and a little bit about you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the mum of Sophia. She is 1 year and 10 months now. So we're going into the toddler stage. It gets better and better, I think, as we progress through the different stages. But I think everyone always says that and thinks that the stage they're at's the best stage, but she's just starting to engage and get really kind of interactive and learn sounds and play games, so it's really fun.
Yeah, that is a really fun age. I think the stage you're at is the best stage until they hit the stages where they start triggering what's going on inside you, and suddenly you're just like, oh, what do I do?
Oh, I've had many of those moments already from the moment that it started. Yeah.
Like, bring on the next stage, bring on the next stage.
Yeah, for sure.
I've now got to that point. My boys are now 10 and 12, so I'm now at this point where they're becoming increasingly independent. I can leave them on their own in the house for a couple of hours. They make their own food, so it's like, it's interesting because it's exciting and it frees me up in so many ways, but then there's also this kind of like, they don't need me so much. There's a loss and a grief, and especially when my youngest son turned 10, that was really significant for me. There was something about that double digits moment and not having a child under 10 anymore that for me was really, really significant. And I think turning 10 growing up was quite a big kind of like rite of passage in my family. It was a really significant thing. So yeah, it's a really interesting journey being a mum. Tell me a little bit about your book, because you're a best-selling author. So I'd love to hear more about your book.
Oh, great. Well, yeah, my book's called An Invitation to the Life of Your Dreams. I published it at the beginning of this year, 2016. And it was something that I've been working on for years, something that I've always wanted to do. But as with many things, life gets in the way, and we're always so busy with our to-do list that we never really get round to those things that are on our bucket lists, the things that are really meaningful to us. So it wasn't until actually I had my daughter, and we had a bit of a rocky start, let's say. It was deemed a sort of traumatic experience. I watched for post-traumatic stress disorder, but it kind of gives you that wake-up call when you realize, when you create life, I think, and when you realize the fragility of it and how time is limited, then it does kind of give you that wake-up call to think about what it is you really want to do out of life. And for me, it was about writing. It was about sharing things that I'd experienced that I thought might be helpful or useful to other people. And I love reading books like The Alchemist or Eat, Pray, Love, where you kind of learn something at the same time. And that's the sort of book I wanted to write. So I'd previously lived and worked in China and was fascinated by their culture, by traditional Chinese medicine, by some of the ancient philosophies that I'd discovered while I was living there. And so the story is a romantic story. It's written for busy women. So there's a kind of a narrative there about a woman who goes off to find herself after having lost herself in a busy career. But also there's elements in there about Chinese philosophy and holistic medicine and health and well-being. So it's something that I hope will resonate with people, but they'll also be able to learn something at the same time.
Wow.
I was really, really pleased with the reviews that have come back so far, because it was pretty scary actually putting it out there. It was one of the scariest things, because I think you're kind of putting yourself out there for judgment, and there's a fear of ridicule, that people will think, what on earth is she doing? This is all kind of very woo-woo. And actually, I thought if one person likes it and benefits from it, then it will have been worthwhile. And so when I first started getting feedback from people saying they loved it, it was brilliant. It was the best thing that I'd ever done. So, well, no, having my daughter was the best thing I'd ever done, of course. But it was something that I'd done for me, which was a big accomplishment for me to have faced my fear and done it.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, and to be a best-selling author, I mean, that's just incredible, the momentum that you've obviously built. I actually just had a conversation yesterday on Facebook with some of the mamas in the group, saying to them that, you know, I'm really struggling to write my book. I have a publisher, my editor loves what I'm writing, but I'm just not making time to write it. And they were like, well, you know, what would B say to you? And they were kind of like turning my coaching back on me. It was brilliant. But, you know, my fears are, as well as being, you know, very busy. I'm a single parent, I'm running a business, I home educate, and, you know, so it's, there is a genuine kind of like, where do I make the time to do this? But actually there are all those fears that you described of judgment and ridicule and things. But for me as well, there's huge fears of huge fears of success that go alongside that. You know, the kind of thought of like, well, shit, if this just kind of goes, you know, massive, how am I going to handle that sudden kind of like, you know, the book tours, the TV, the radio, the travel, even though I love all of those things, and that, you know, I love the idea of being at book tours and signing books and things, you know, but it's kind of like, oh, you know, could I actually cope with it? So it's really interesting. So although when I sit down to write, I can write quite quickly and my editor loves my writing, yeah, I've got my own block. So it's lovely to hear you talk about the fact that that was quite a long journey to, you know, that book was quite a long time coming.
Yeah.
You know.
And I'd suggest just take it step by step. Don't try not to overthink it, because that is where we get the overwhelm from, because suddenly our thoughts run away with us and everything becomes too big and scary, and then it becomes impossible. It seems too big. So actually just think about, what one thing can I do right now in the next 10 minutes that will actually move me towards my goal? And it doesn't matter what your goal is, but just one small thing, and really make it the smallest possible achievable thing you can do, and just do it step by step. And actually you'll be amazed by what you can achieve just doing it like in tiny little steps.
Yes. That's really valuable. That's really valuable wisdom. And it reminds me of something a business coach said to me once, that the energy of overwhelm is dissipated by the energy of choice. If you choose one thing and act on it, then it changes the whole energy around overwhelm. And of course, as mums, there can be a lot of overwhelm. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you have applied that kind of thinking and other kinds of thinking that you bring into the work you do to your role as a parent, and, you know, all the responsibilities and challenges and activities and scheduling and everything that goes with being a mum on top of everything else. How have you applied some of your wisdom to that process, to that journey?
Good question. Well, I suppose if we start with that one, just taking it bit by bit, step by step, that's exactly what I did in the first 6 months for me were just a complete whirlwind of sleeplessness, and I'm sure they are for everybody. And I had to just literally take it nap to nap. That was the window that I could see. And I knew if I could just last these, whatever it was, 45 minutes to 3 hours, there would be another nap, and then I could have, you know, a close of my eyes, or I could have a moment to kind of catch my breath in amongst everything, all the madness that's going on. And so just taking it bit by bit was something that I applied there to those first 6 months for sure. And then I think with regards to setting goals, I knew what I wanted to do, which was to publish my book. And yes, it did seem big and scary, but just thinking, what small things could I do that day? What one thing could I do that day, that would move me closer? And it might just be having 5 minutes to have a think about something. That might be all I'd achieve that day. But as long as I did one thing for myself, then I didn't get that sense of panic that, oh my goodness, I haven't been able to do anything because I've just been so consumed with giving of myself to my children, or to this craziness that's going on. There's so much going on in our daily lives. It is difficult to find the time for yourself, and therefore it can weigh us down, because we start getting resentful or feeling that frustration that we just don't have the time to do the things we really want to be doing. And actually, sometimes you can just take 5 minutes and just take a deep breath and think, okay, I'm just going to make a decision. That's what I'm going to do. That's my thing for today. And then I'll have achieved something. And celebrating the smallest things and feeling accomplished, not feeling that, okay, I haven't written the best-selling novel in a day. But that's all right, because I've made a decision that tomorrow I'm going to do X, Y, Z. So, not beating yourself up, not being hard on yourself, because we all just have to take it bit by bit and do what we can. Yeah. But always, I guess the other thing is as well, I was thinking about this recently, about personal power, because there's so much stuff going on in the world. There's so many things that come at us, and it's very easy to hand over your personal power, to feel that you don't have any sense of personal power because you're so busy reacting and helping and dealing with other people. But actually, how we respond and how we choose to think about things is the power that we have. And so if we can hold on to that and keep that personal power, then it can serve us and give us the strength when we're exhausted and everything's kind of flying at us, and we think, okay, how do I choose to react in this moment? That's the power I have. Yeah. I can't control what's going on, I can't control other people, but I can control how I respond to it and what my reaction's going to be. So it's not always easy, but having that kind of at the back of your mind that, okay, I can take the choice to take 5 minutes just to breathe and reconnect, sometimes can be the most empowering thing we can do. Yeah, absolutely. When it feels overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that thing of personal power, alongside where you started, which was kind of like with the self-care element of, ensuring that you don't get lost in the middle of being a mum or in the middle of everything else, that you're still finding ways to say yes to yourself. So, like, those two things go hand in hand, don't they? Like, the first step of personal power is to take responsibility for your own needs, essentially, isn't it? Which is the first step of yes parenting, is to say yes to needs and to start with yourself. It's that whole, you get on an airplane and they give you the safety briefing and you put your oxygen mask on before you help anyone else. And if you don't, then you put not only your own life at risk, but other people's lives. Yeah. And also, the other thing that came to my mind when you were talking about that was, when you were talking about personal power, was that thing about worry. And I think the worry comes in from the overwhelm, and then we can get really caught up in it. And I love that saying, I don't remember who said it, but it's something along the lines of, you don't need to worry. If you have control over it, well, don't worry, because you can take action. And if you don't have control over it, well, don't worry, because you can't do anything about it. Yeah. But that's a fine line, I think, as you're walking, especially through motherhood, and no matter what stage your children are at, your mum brain is in full force, even though it's also trying to maybe work and it's trying to do house and it's trying to do all these other things. Your mum brain is in full force. So sometimes I think we can lose sight of, well, what do I have control over and what don't I have control over? And I noticed this with my parenting coaching. People so desperately want to, find a way to fix their child's discomfort or behavior and things like that. And so often the behavior just needs to play itself out. Like, we can only control our children's behavior with fear. But, if we're choosing to parent without fear, then we don't have control over that either. So I'm really excited about what you're going to share with us during your week in the group is not only going to help me and the other mums kind of just really connect with this sense of kind of, how did you describe it? Kind of like, the personal power and living the life of your dreams and having this transformation on a personal I.M.B. Marshall front, but actually transferring those things into who I am as a mother. And then I guess also who I am as a partner or a lover, and who I am as a colleague. And so it's really exciting. It's really exciting. What do you think would be, I know that you've already kind of like mapped out what you're going to be bringing to the group each day, and it looks amazing. When someone is in that kind of place of having completely lost sight of who they are as a woman, their identity, they just motherhood has taken over. What are the kind of the top 3 things that you would want to share with them to help them begin to reconnect with who they are? Because I know that some of the questions you ask, which are amazing questions, for some people, I think, they've almost lost so much connection with themselves that actually even trying to think, well, what do I want is like, that's too difficult. So what would be the top 3 things that you would suggest to somebody to help them begin to reconnect with themselves?
It's a great question, because I think we do sometimes completely lose a sense of ourselves beyond the roles that we play. And I certainly have. So I used to work in the corporate world, and I realized I didn't know who I was anymore. I knew the role I played. I knew what I was as a professional career woman, but I didn't know who I was beyond that. And similarly, I think we can give too much of ourselves away sometimes that we lose sight of who we are. So it's a great question. It's interesting because you mentioned some of the questions I ask, and really when we go through the Live Your Purpose program, it's about asking the right questions to enable people to search within, to find that sense of themselves again. We all have it, we all know who we are, but we just forget. We're born with a sense of purpose, with a sense of knowing, but life gets in the way. There's so many things that are competing for our attention that it's hard to kind of keep hold of that. So it's really about asking the questions to get back, to look within, to reconnect. And so one of the questions that I asked when I gave my TEDx talk was, what makes you happy? And it's such a simple question, but actually so many people had a real difficulty answering it. And the answers ranged everything from ice cream to family to loved ones. But interestingly, nobody said money that I asked. Nobody said their jobs and careers. It all came about families, loved ones, connections. It was much more about who we are at the core of our being than all the things that keep us busy. And we're supposed to have between 60 and 80,000 thoughts a day. And most of them are about what we should be doing and who we should be doing it for. And very few thoughts are actually about who we are as a person and what does make us happy. And so just asking yourself simple questions like that, empowering questions. What do I want? What would my ideal life look like? What is it that makes me happy? And then thinking about how you can bring that into your life. So things like taking a walk with nature has been proven to enhance our general well-being and state of mind. But sometimes it's hard to get out the front door to actually do it. But if you've got in your mind that that's something that's important to you, then it kind of helps propel you forward. And one of the things I also do in the 5-step program, Live Your Purpose, is to encourage people to identify their key values. So the values are the things that are most important to you and that drive you. And it's a really interesting exercise, actually, because I did this years ago and I thought, right, I absolutely know what my values are. They're unshakable. And I did them again recently after I'd had my daughter, and they had completely changed. Obviously, family had become top, whereas before it was about integrity, because I was running a charity. And whilst integrity is still in my top 3, family was really important. And we do a kind of an exercise where you look at your values to really understand which ones are the most important to you. And you can also choose to rearrange them as well. So when I did it recently, I did my top 10 values, and I was kind of struggling with the last few, and I thought, okay, what am I missing? I'm missing something really important here. And it was health and well-being. And I thought, oh yeah, okay, so that was my number 10. And then when I did the exercise of testing them all to make sure they were in the right order, I actually found out that health and well-being was number 2 rather than number 10. Because if you don't have your health, then what do you have? So my family was most important to me, but then my health was really important, health and well-being, because you can have all the money and success and integrity in the world, but if you don't have your health and your well-being, then it's meaningless. So actually, by doing that exercise, it changed my values hierarchy. And then I when I had some spare time, I had decisions to make. And do I go for a walk, or go and do something healthy and that was exercise, or do I do something that is going to help me with my book launch, or something that I need to do for my to-do list? And actually I was like, no, health is really important to me, so I'm going to take that value and I'm going to use my 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it was to do something that helped propel that value forward. So actually, just by thinking about what's important to us and what's meaningful, it helps us to use our time and our energy and that little bit of resource that we've got in meaningful ways to us. Right. So I think asking the empowering questions, being aware of our values.
Isn't it interesting that that health and well-being ended up being your second most important, even though it was the one that you kind of had to scrabble around to find at the end?
Yeah.
So, and it just shows that there's, even though we can consciously be thinking about who we are and what we want and things, actually we might be missing something. So I'm excited about how you lead us through these things during the week to help us kind of connect with things deeper and bring things to the surface that might be really important but perhaps are not showing up in a conscious way. So great. So
the unconscious mind is the powerhouse, really, but it's not always, obviously, what we're conscious of is only such a tip of the iceberg of actually all of the massive amounts of information that we're processing at any given point. And people talk about the law of attraction and attracting what you want. If you look at it from a cognitive psychology point of view, which my degree's in, so I kind of really resonated with that, it's actually so interesting that what we consciously think about, we can hold about 5 to 9 bits of information at a time in our short-term memory, but our unconscious is processing about 134 million bits of information every second. Wow. So it's such a powerhouse. It's a vast library. Everything around us, it's controlling our breathing, our heart, our temperature, everything that's surrounding us, the sounds that we hear, but we're not conscious of many of it. So actually, by telling our conscious what we want it to focus on, by, for example, doing the values exercise and thinking I want to focus more on my health and well-being, it then makes us aware of things and opportunities that will enable that to come to light, come to mind. So it's a really interesting area. It's very complex, but it's something I'm fascinated in as well. It touches, you see it from both a spiritual perspective. People, sort of spiritual masters, talk about it. I was with Deepak Chopra a little while ago doing a workshop with him, and it's fascinating some of the things he's talking about and how our thoughts can actually now change our DNA. It's kind of mind-blowing. But also from a scientific point of view and a business success strategy point of view, it's all perspectives say the same things, but just in different ways.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. I mean, I love Deepak Chopra, and I also love Bruce Lipton and all his work around the biology of belief and epigenetics. And there are hospitals now over in the East where they don't use any medicine, surgery, or anything like that. They bring in 3 healers, in inverted commas, who literally will just visualize the healing process. And they have shown this on video using scans and things to actually show that simply by these 3 people, setting their intention to visualize, a tumor disappearing and things like that, you can see on the scan that it happens, and it happens really quickly. It's incredibly powerful, the power of thought, and, extraordinary. So I'm really interested in that as well. Yeah. So just before we go, you are the co-founder of a charity, and I would love to give you the opportunity to share a little bit about your charity, about what inspired you to set it up and the kind of work that you do, and how that, I guess, connects with your own life purpose.
Okay, great. Yes, well, I sort of mentioned before that I used to work in the corporate world, and I had a great career that really pushed me hard, and I was fortunate to be on a leadership development program that took 2 years to complete, and I got to fly all over the world and lead international teams, and it was brilliant. I absolutely loved it. But there was a moment, and I was at TED at the time, where I was sat in the audience and all these people were on the stage, and they were talking so passionately about things that were so meaningful to them, about how they were changing the world and what they were doing to make a real difference. And I kind of just had that moment. I thought, oh my goodness, what am I doing to contribute to the life of others? I'm working really hard and I've got all the rewards for it, but I'm not necessarily sharing those with others in the most effective way, or using my energy and my resource in the most beneficial way to make a real difference in the world. So I don't know if this is something everybody experiences. I'd like to think it is. I'm not just completely alone, but I definitely had that moment and that realization that I thought, okay, there must be more to life than this. And I didn't know how to do anything about it. I didn't know where to start. I was working 20-hour days some days, and I didn't have the time to kind of think, all right, now how do I go off and find myself and my purpose in life? So I was lucky. It took me 18 months, but I managed to get a career sabbatical of 3 months, and I pursued my love of writing, and I went back to China where I'd lived previously and volunteered. So I traveled independently on my own, and I was volunteering with orphanages and refugee camps and displaced communities. And there was a few interesting lessons that I learned there, one of which was that I was completely stripped of everything. So going back to what we were saying at the beginning of the conversation, who are you when you're not defined by your roles? I was completely stripped of roles. So nobody knew me. I couldn't really speak the language well enough to hold a proper conversation. I could get by, but nothing, on an intellectual level. And I certainly didn't know how to read or write. So I was a communication specialist who couldn't communicate. I was out my comfort zone. And it was quite scary and quite hard, and I felt really alone, but actually it pushed me so far outside my comfort zone that it was one of those moments that I think when you're so stretched beyond what's familiar and comfortable, then it's when you can have those moments of realization. And when I met some of these incredible people through the volunteering work I was doing, particularly some of the children in the orphanages who had gone through the most horrendous experiences, just terrible, and yet somehow they had such a gratitude for life. They were so grateful for everything, just you even stopping to talk to them and ask them a question and let them practice their English with you. And as such, they seemed really happy. And it was bizarre, because I was thinking back to London at the time. It was going through riots, and how in relative sense we've won the lottery of life. We have access to healthcare, to education, to resources, yet there's so much unhappiness and discontent in our society. And I decided that I wanted to explore that further, and through my charity work, I think I identified that it does come down to that sense of purpose, because many of the philanthropists and the major donors that I worked with, they'd been incredibly successful. They had millions of pounds sometimes, and yet if they didn't have that sense of purpose, of meaning, of contribution, then they weren't happy. And it was really insightful. So I've learned a lot from both ends of the spectrum, which is kind of what's led me to bring together some of the tools and techniques for helping people to reconnect with their purpose. But the charity that we set up, we launched in 2012, it's called the Rainmaker Foundation. And it was really a new innovative charity, and it was to inspire effective generosity. So there was lots of people who wanted to help make a difference, but didn't know how. People like myself, people like the major donors I've talked about, people who have incredible skills or time or resources, connections, passions, but they don't know how to use that, to channel it, to make a difference to charities. And on the other hand, there are all these charities who desperately need help. Last time I looked, there was over 180,000 registered charities in the UK, and that was a couple of years ago. And they're all desperately fighting for resources, and they need new ways of working, new ways of collaborating to share those resources. So we were kind of like charity cupids, I guess, connecting the two together, trying to find ways to make meaningful connections, so that those who wanted to help with whatever way of helping they had, whether it be money, time, skills, expertise, resources, and those that needed that help could come together and make that transition effective and mutually beneficial to both sides. So it was a real journey. We started the charity in an economic downturn where everyone was struggling for cash, and we had this wonderful idea that it would be self-sustaining, and that 100% of all donations would go directly to the cause. Wow. And that we would earn our overheads through advisory work. So it ended up, we were kind of almost running a business alongside the charity, because we were advising companies and families and philanthropists on their charitable giving, as well as making all these connections. And we were a tiny team, but it was great. It always reminds me of that amazing quote by Margaret Mead about never underestimate what a few passionate, dedicated individuals can achieve. So in the first 3 years that we founded it, we managed to help over 150 different charities with over 2,000 hours of pro bono free expertise from lawyers and marketing experts and people who had skills and knowledge, and over £2 million of resource. So it was a huge accomplishment. It was great. It was hard work for sure. And the moment, my last day, I was very lucky, because my last day was a gala dinner that we ran for our community. We brought together these amazing people who are called rainmakers, and they're the ones who really made the difference. They're the people who are committed to making a positive change through their contribution. And they all come together and they help the charities. So the small team of 5 people were really nothing compared to this incredible community of rainmakers who are making the difference. And we had this gala dinner, and some of the people whose lives have been changed stood up and shared their story. And that to me was the most special moment that kind of made it all worthwhile, because they were real people whose lives have been changed as a result of the people in that room. And that was a really special thing. So when I had my daughter, I realized that it was time to hand the running of the organization as a director over to somebody else and allow it to grow and flourish with new leadership. It did need that sort of 24/7 commitment. It was my first baby, and then I had a new baby to look after. So I handed it over, and it's now being led by an incredible team, a new team who are taking it to new levels. And they've got an accelerator program where they focus on fewer charities, but helping them in much more meaningful ways. So they really get to grips with how they need help, and then they'll go off and find the resources that they need. So if anyone's interested, rainmakerfoundation.org is the website.
Wonderful. Well, Hollie, it's been so great to talk with you today. Thank you for joining me. I can't wait to welcome you into my membership group next week and do more of this work with you. So thank you for being here.
Thanks ever so much for inviting me to join you guys. I'm looking forward to the week ahead. So thanks, and speak to you all soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.